Since 2015, Pop Health Podcast has brought to you some of the best minds in healthcare, including leaders from government, not-for-profit, and investor-backed powerhouses, as they share successes, failures, and how our audience can move forward in today's constantly evolving healthcare world. Thank you for joining us for today's episode presented by 24 Hour Home Care. Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Pop Health Podcast. I'm Gavin Ward, host for today's episode. Today, I had the opportunity to sit down with Sylvain Trepanier, the Senior Vice President and System Chief Nursing Officer for Providence St. Joseph Health. I had the opportunity to get to know Syl last year through an introduction with Eric Wexler, another leader there at Providence, where I learned of Syl's knowledge and skills as a nursing leader. He's since been promoted and oversees 48,000 nursing staff for Providence in the many states and 52 hospital ministries throughout the Western United States. In today's episode, we really dug into the role of a nurse and a nurse executive or chief nursing officer for a hospital setting. Syl breaks down his history as a nurse and how for 32 years, and more to come, he's been continuing to rise through the nursing ranks. Syl shares a great story at the end that's a relatively simple story, but gives us a reason to smile at the end of our day. I hope you enjoyed today's episode. Feel free to check out other episodes of Pop Health Podcast by visiting us on our YouTube channel, pophealthpodcast.com, or Stitcher, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you listen to your podcasts. Thanks, everybody. Enjoy the show. Well, Syl, thanks so much for joining the show today.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So folks, for those of you that don't know, Syl has actually helped me on a different project last year when my day job, we were returning to the workplace. And with Syl's expertise working in a hospital setting, and of course, with the pandemic, Syl volunteered some of his time to help my colleagues, many of whom go to your ministries or hospitals for care. So great to have you back, Syl.
All right, it's great to be back. Thank you so much.
No problem. So we like to kick off the show getting to know you a little bit. And then later on, we'll go ahead and get into the nursing leadership role that we'll talk about. So Syl, tell us something about you outside of healthcare, if you don't mind, like a fun fact, hobby, something like that.
Absolutely. You know, something that many people don't know is that I have a passion for acting. And in fact, when I was in nursing school, I was also in acting school at the same time, and did a lot of plays. Now, you may remember this, that I'm originally from Montreal, Canada. So everything I've done on stage has been in French. Never done anything in English. Everything's been in French, and so I did a few plays, and then I everything became very serious, and where I was at a fork, and I had to make a decision. You know, either I can't do both full time. Obviously, really the decision making really didn't take that long. Was I going to be making a life of all about me being on stage versus of all about for others and helping others? And here I am, decided to become a nurse full time and do this. And it was the best decision I've ever made. Why am I sharing this with you? Because when it's time for me to retire, guess which love I'm going to go back to afterwards.
Nice. You mentioned, you chose being a nurse instead of an actor. At what point, as you're growing up in Canada, did you make that decision?
Yeah, when I was, I always forget exactly how old I was. Between 7 to 10 years old, somewhere around there. My dad got diagnosed with diabetes. He was a late type 1 diabetic. Type 1 diabetics are typically diagnosed at a very young age, and this is where you're insulin dependent, where you have to give yourself shots every day. My dad was, 5 at the time, way back when I was a kid. So he was 5'7", and he was like a little over 220 pounds. And within a matter of 3 months, I don't forget exactly the timeline here, but lost close to 100 pounds or something crazy like that. He just disappeared in front of us. And found himself, in the hospital. He was really sick, and I was frightened. I was frightened as a kid, seeing him being, so sick. And then coming back home and feeling the urge to take care of him, to do something for him. And so much so that I asked him to teach me how to help him with giving his insulin when I was a child. I'm taking you like back many years ago, where you didn't even have a way to check your blood sugar on an ongoing basis the way you have it today. I mean, today they put stuff on their arm and then they see electronically what their blood sugar is. But he had to pee into this. He had to put urine into this little tube, put a capsule in it, and then shake it. And depending on the color of it, it would tell you, how much sugar was in his system. So I would play in helping him read this, and then helping with his shot, and really got a huge passion for caring and knowing that I'm doing something that's meaningful to help him stay well.
Yeah.
And I was hooked. I was hooked right there, and that stuck with me. That stuck with me the entire time. So when it was time for me to, make decision, I knew very early on in high school, middle school, high school, I was going to do something in healthcare, and pretty much, and nursing very quickly. And why nursing? Well, I could see, and I'm glad I saw that earlier on, that the ability to be able to be educated and developed as a healthcare professional with a holistic mind, and the ability to be able to see the whole person, physically, mentally, psychologically, spiritually, and the likes, and understanding that all of those components makes us whole.
Yeah.
And without seeing the whole person, you're missing out, and you might be going down the wrong path. So having that holistic view of how to care for someone was very important to me and very appealing to me, and that's, so it was very clear.
Wow. So you knew that going in, you stuck to your path. Where did you end up going to nursing school?
I ended up going to nursing school at the L'Université de Montréal, as they would say it back home, which I did not know back then, but is actually the largest French-speaking university in the world.
Oh wow! So is it
they still own that title, but they used to for a while. What was that?
Is it a large university? I'm not familiar.
It's pretty large. Yeah,
Okay.
It's pretty large. A couple of tens of thousands of people that are enrolled on any given day. I mean, it has a really big campus up in Montreal, and then some satellite campuses, and they also have a pretty robust international school, business school, and it's a school of medicine as well, and then school of nursing, and all allied health, law. It really gets a full blown. I can't think of a discipline that they don't have their hands in,
okay.
and they do it. I mean, they do it very well. So I was actually pretty excited to be accepted. Even back then, it was not easy. Mm-hmm. It was not easy to get into nursing school. I ended up. Our school is a little bit different in Canada. So after you're done with your high school, everyone has to. So we call it college back there, and it's either a 2 or 3 year program, and then you have to graduate from college with a 2 or 3 year degree to get into a baccalaureate degree. So at the end of the day, post high school, my baccalaureate degree is essentially 5 years post high school.
Okay,
is how what it ends up being. So that's where I went to school.
Okay, cool. So you go to school there, and then at what point did you end up crossing the border and coming to the United States, and what was that inspiration?
So I'm going to tell you, there are two things that became very clear to me very quickly in nursing school. The first one was that I was going to be a nurse leader.
Okay.
Had my first I think it was in the first year. I had a class on leadership and administration, and just got like hooked. And honestly, and I shared with you that I was doing some stuff in acting, and I had an acting team and formed a small company way back when.
Oh, dang.
And so always, and led, that group of friends, if you would. So every place I would find myself, I would kind of gravitate towards that role of, helping others and leading us, as a team. So it was a bit of a natural fit for me to find myself that even in that work, as I practiced very quickly, as soon as I got very comfortable in my practice setting, I very quickly became, charge nurse and really leading the clinical team. I started teaching very quickly also, because I've always had a passion in helping others becoming nurses. So I would teach clinicals for nurses very early on as well. And so I knew I wanted to be a nurse leader, and I was getting a sense very early on, obviously the delivery model in the States is very different than the delivery model in Canada. And I was very intrigued by the business side of healthcare, which is, it might be a strong word to say it's non-existent in Canada. It's just not. It's not in the fiber. It's not in the culture. It's not what it is. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way.
Right.
It's just different. So I was very intrigued by that, and felt that in order to be a well-rounded leader in healthcare, that having experience in what does it mean to lead in a completely different model, that would really allow me for some much better understanding and also the ability to lead different teams differently with different perspective. So that's why I decided to come to the U.S. really, because I was very much attracted to knowing that I could be a different type of leaders and learning different skills.
Okay, cool. You mentioned healthcare in Canada is definitely a lot different than the U.S. and there's a different business climate or lack thereof almost in Canada. We had a guest on last year named Karen Nelson. She was a executive director of case management for Stanford. And she's a social worker by nature. So as you can imagine, universal healthcare in Canada, for her, there was definitely some benefits to that. And she definitely felt that I won't speak on her behalf, but definitely felt that the US was different, to say the least. So you come over to the US, and just getting to know you a little bit still previously, and trying to do some homework ahead of time. I know you worked in the ED. I believe it was your early days in the US. Do I have that right?
You have that right.
Okay.
So your sources are pretty good. I came in this country as a travel nurse, working in the emergency department.
And was that Florida or?
Yep, that was Florida.
Okay.
Florida. I mean, I did some stuff in other states, but because what happened is, I ended up coming to the States, like literally, I graduated. So I did my bachelor's in French, right? University of Montreal is a French-speaking university, and practiced in French-speaking as I was, learning, and I did my boards back home in English, knowing that it would allow me to get reciprocity for licensure in the States.
Did you, in Montreal, you grow up learning English, correct? Also?
As a second language, yes.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. Okay.
So I came here and I worked a little bit, and I wanted to get my master's degree. Now, if if we think that tuition is high, try foreign tuition. Because at that time, I was not a permanent resident. I was working on a working visa. So everywhere I would, if I wanted to go back to school, I was considered a foreign student way back when. I couldn't even wrap my head around what that cost was. So I moved back home and I did my master's degree. And when I came back, so when we're talking about, and I always talk about the fact that when I've really been here, I kind of sort of don't count the first time because I was here for a short stay, but really in 97 is when I came here full time as a traveler in the emergency department in Florida.
Okay, gotcha. So you come back, you're permanent, I guess, if you will, in the late 90s.
Yep.
And you go to Florida, and I mean, travel nursing is huge today, but obviously it was a thing then too.
Yeah.
So at what point did you want to plant roots in?
Pretty much then. I mean, I knew the easiest way for me to come here was as a traveler. It was the easiest way to come in, and it would also allow me to try something. And if I didn't like it, I could try someplace else. So I came not with the intent of always being a traveler, but really leveraging being a traveler to allow me to find a home.
Okay. Got it. It's funny. I prepared some questions looking at your background about at what point, did you want to be a leader? And we're already there. So you came in, you're a traveler, as you're a traveler looking to stay here in the US, you're seeking career advancement right away, I'm guessing, right? You have that natural inclination. So just looking through your history, you did clinical director roles. And then 2004, was your first CNO role.
Yes.
If I have my information correct. So how was that? Where was that?
So that was in Miami, Florida. I actually, in 2001, I joined a hospital in Miami, Florida, North Shore Medical Center. Great people. I learned so much. I still have some connection with some people that still practice there.
Oh, nice.
And I joined the organization as an associate CNO. I was the director of nursing operation, essentially overseeing a few departments and nursing administration, which is essentially the nursing supervisors and the likes, bed placement, and all of that. And so I joined that organization doing that. And
sorry, Sil.
Yeah.
I know for you and many of our audience, bed placement is a term they know.
Yeah.
But there's going to be a lot of listeners and viewers who don't know what that means. Do you mind sharing?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So this is where, you have patients coming in into the, typically people will come in either through the emergency department, and then they get seen by physicians and the whole team, and then they realize that they need to be admitted into the hospital and spend some time. There's a whole process that occurs at that time that you get admission orders, and then you then are being placed into a type of bed depending on the level of care that's required for you. So sometimes some people may need to be in an intensive care unit, others may need to be on a medical surgical unit, or depending on what the issues are. And there's the whole process behind the scene where you have people who then are taking all that information, the clinical information, and what we're going to be doing for you and with you, and the type of supervision that will be required for the type of care that you need. And then we place you, bed placement, into the proper unit within the organization where you can get all that information. So all of that work was under my responsibility when I was the director of nursing operations. And the beauty about this particular role is that it allowed me, I essentially was interacting with everybody and everyone in the organization. This is where you have 24/7 accountability. 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. It's nonstop, and you work very closely with nurses, with physicians, and the whole ancillary team. You essentially, everybody knows you in the organization, and you know everybody in the organization very quickly. This chief nursing officer transition in 2004, early 2004. I think it was January-ish. And I was appointed on an interim basis, and applied for the role. And then I think 3 months later or something like that is when I got my official first chief nurse role, which it was a very important milestone for me in my career, because I went into nursing, 1986. I'm starting brand new as a nursing student with the aspiration of one day becoming a chief nursing officer, and here I am.
Yeah, man, you did it.
Pretty quick.
Yeah, that's awesome. So 2004, you had the role. Let's fast forward to 2008. And in 2008, you were working for Tenet Healthcare, if I have my notes here correct, and you were overseeing CNOs throughout much of the nation. So let's start breaking down the CNO role a little bit, because I think many of us kind of know the CNO is above the department, the nursing supervisors, and it seems like they're the boss, but we don't really know what a CNO does, right? So what are some of the pressures that the CNO has to deal with?
Yeah. So the CNO, the chief nursing officer, is essentially the most senior nurse of any organization. So if you're talking in a ministry or in a hospital, it's whomever has accountability, ultimate accountability, that the buck stops with. From a nursing practice perspective, the buck stops with the chief nursing officer. So accountable for nursing care, accountable for nursing outcome, accountable for the component of quality of care that nursing practice is accountable for. I mean, nothing is done in isolation in healthcare. The whole healthcare team wraps around individuals to care for them, and there's certain discipline-specific outcomes and accountabilities that are expected, both from a regulatory perspective and from a practice perspective. And that's ultimately that's what that CNO is there for. So it's the accountability from a practice perspective. It's accountability to be the voice of the patient when there are administrative decisions that are being made, and what's the impact on our patient, and as equally important, it's the voice of all the nurses and the practice of nursing in an organization. When you think about a hospital acute care setting, the reason for its entire existence is to provide care 24/7. Otherwise, people would get treatment, go back to their home, and then that's that. But some people require to be observed on an ongoing basis, continuously, and then treatment along the way. And the people who are doing that are the nurses. The rest of the team are coming in, they're popping in and out, but the nurses are essentially holding that patient that entire time that they are required to spend a time in the hospital. So that's oftentimes why I say the nurses are the heart of the care that's being rendered in an acute care setting. You can't be in a hospital and be a patient without being touched by a nurse multiple times in your time.
Yeah. So you mentioned the buck stops here. You kind of gave us lots of, you guys have a lot of pressure and accountability. So besides patient care, as a nursing leader, and I know this can be a sensitive subject, so I'll try to be delicate here. One of the things you have to do is ensure that your organization, and today, there's thousands of nurses, with Providence St. Joseph Health. How do you make sure, like, the nursing unions and you guys are fully staffed, and you're like, how do you negotiate all that and deal with all that? Can you give us an example?
Yeah, so there's a lot of stuff in that question.
There is a lot.
I'll break it apart a little bit. I'll address head on your question about the unions.
Yeah, please.
So the first thing that I'd like to say about that is I fully believe, in my heart, that everyone has a choice. Everyone has a choice. You have a choice to either be represented or not, and that's your right, and you exercise that as you see fit. No different than exercising your right to vote in a general election. And I get that, and I fully support that. And some people choose to be represented by a third party, and some others choose not to. And so at the end of the day, when you're a chief nurse practicing in an organization where you may have nurses who have chosen to be represented by a third party, well, what happens is that when you are thinking about making changes in certain practices or protocols and the likes, you have to make sure that you engage with that third party into those conversations. At the end of the day, from my perspective, and this is Syl's personal perspective, not necessarily Syl's as the assistant chief nurse of Providence, but from my personal perspective, it doesn't matter whether nurses choose to be represented or not. Everyone, I've always treated people the same way. When you treat people the way you would want to be treated, and when you offer people an opportunity to voice their opinion, a venue to voice their opinion, and you treat everyone fairly and equally, it doesn't really matter whether there's a union or not. The rules are the same, at the end of the day. The only difference is if you're in an organization where nurses have chosen to be represented, then there's some rules of engagement that you have to follow. And that's it. So you might have to jump a few more hoops to get a few more things done. But at the end of the day, it's no different. Even if they're not represented, I don't believe in Syl in his own office making decisions and pushing it down.
Yeah.
It doesn't work anyway. You can try it. You may think you've done something, but you really haven't accomplished anything because no one's going to do it.
Yeah, no one's bought in. So I didn't realize, so forgive me if I'm wrong. So like my wife is a teacher in California, where a lot of your ministries are located. In audience, you'll notice me and Syl use the term ministry. That's the term that Providence St. Joseph Health uses for its acute care medical centers, based on its history. And maybe, Syl, could you maybe just briefly, in like a 30 seconds, explain the term ministry and why ministry for PSJH?
Yeah, so Providence is a mission-driven, faith-based organization. And so as a faith-based organization, we minister, right? We provide care following the rules, the laws, and how Jesus did. So everywhere where we can offer our services are places where we consider our ministries. So the acute care hospitals are ministries. Offices are ministries.
Okay.
Every places where care can be rendered is a ministry.
Okay, thank you for clarifying. I always just thought it was called the medical centers, but it's everywhere. Very good. Okay, so my wife's a teacher here in California, and she has a choice not to be part of the union, but not really. So it was interesting to find out that your nurses have that choice.
Well, remember, there's also different state rules, right? So there's some states where you have, so there's the right to choose, the right to vote, estate, and practice. So, and some places are so California has its own rule, Texas, for example. So I'm showing you two completely opposite states right now on the different rules around that, and when I became a nurse in Canada, different rules there as well. When I graduated, and as I graduated, all the nurses are unionized, and actually, so you're a government employee as a nurse in the province of Quebec, and I immediately and everyone. So it's not a choice that I had. So the nurses chose many years ago to be represented, and because of the way the laws are written, I'm automatically represented, whether I want it or not, and I'm already paying in, and that just is what it is.
Okay.
In some states, in some states, it's not the case. Some people may choose to be represented, and I may choose, for instance, not to pay the dues, and therefore I'm not represented, but my fellow colleagues are. In other states, if a bargaining union is, got voted in, then no matter what, even if you voted against it, you're represented as well. So there's some nuances here.
Okay, great. Thank you very much. So we talked a little bit about what ministries are at PSJH. I mentioned there's thousands and thousands. Can you give the audience, high-level overview of Providence St. Joseph Health? Where is it located? That type of thing.
Yeah, based in Renton, Washington, which is where I live now. When you and I first met, I lived in Southern California at the time, because the office was based in Irvine when I was representing the Southern California hospital. So based in Renton, Washington, practice in 7 states. We have 52 ministries, hospital ministries across the United States. Texas, we practice in New Mexico, California, Oregon, Washington, Montana, Alaska. Those is the state where we practice. We have over 1,000 clinics across the entire healthcare system. We have about, roughly on any given day, somewhere around 120,000 people of Providence, and 48,000 of which are nurses.
Wow, you said 48,000.
Yeah.
Wow. And the buck stops with you, huh? That's a lot of responsibility there, Syl. That is quite a bit. I may have shared this with you last year when you helped my day job at our return to work. But I was born at a Providence, prior to Providence taking over, but little company there in Torrance, which I'm sure you've been to many times. So I'm sure many of our listeners and audience, similar situations.
Yep.
So you mentioned the 48,000 nurses. Thank you as well. I know talking about unions can be a delicate situation. I think we did that well. You did that well. So let's talk about the nursing shortage, which generally speaking, at least in my lifetime in healthcare, and probably yours as well, that's been a topic that's generally been top of mind. In your lens, what's a real solution for this?
Yeah, it's multifactorial. I graduated, I became a nurse, and it was in a nursing shortage, and there's been ups and downs.
Okay.
Over the last few decades. I can't believe it's been 32 years for me. It's kind of crazy. So there's been some ups and downs. I think that what we're facing with right now is literally the perfect storm.
Yeah.
So what happened is that we knew that at the beginning, from 2020 to 2030, roughly around there, this decade was going to be challenged with just on a pure numbers perspective, looking at supply, demand, number of people who are entering the profession, becoming nurses, taking into considerations those who are retiring and leaving the profession on an active basis, and looking at all of those numbers. Way back when we were looking at this decade, we knew we were going to be, struggling. And that's why there was a lot of efforts in the previous decade to mitigate that, because we knew we were going to get into this stage. So there's a lot of work that was done to increase the number of of nurses that we would be graduating. So nursing schools started to work on that, making sure that we had more people who would go into academia so that we could have enough people to train and educate our nurses. So all of those things were happening. Johnson & Johnson, just to name one particular organization, offered a lot of efforts and support and philanthropy dollars, and then further, supporting the profession. And so lots of sorts of organization that really rallied around that. So we have that, and we knew that it was going to be tricky. And then, as it turns out, a few years ago, not that long ago, there's always been these interim reports that came out that told us, hey, all the work that you've done is actually going to serve us well. Now we will have some pocket. So here's the message that we were hearing 2 years ago.
Okay.
Good news is we're not going to be lacking as many nurses as we thought we were. However, it's not going to be balanced. There's going to be some states where we're going to have too many, believe it or not, and some states where we're just not going to have enough. And we need to figure out a way to even this out. That was a little bit of the message that we were hearing. And then COVID hits.
Yeah.
COVID hits, and here's what the nurses, so brand new nurses and perhaps aspiring nurses that are now seeing, I guess it is a bit of a dangerous job. I guess there's a lot of unknown. We don't know when that thing's going to be over. There's not enough people. People are working really hard. And to add insult to injury, it becomes this, and I'm still trying to wrap my head around this, on how this world pandemic became so politicized, and then it just got off the railroad track. And all of a sudden, you're seeing this divide, this huge divide that creates so much complexity that no one needed. And so when you layer that on top of layer, on top of layer, on top of layer, I am worried today.
Yeah.
I'm worried today way much more so than I was, 2 years ago. I'm worried today more than a year ago, because I'm seeing some people now who are exiting the profession.
Yeah.
Or exiting healthcare altogether, that we were not anticipating.
Yeah, and if we can, if I can ask for some vulnerability, I'm assuming some of that also hits Providence, 52 ministries and almost 50,000 nurses.
Yeah.
So, you're supposed to be this raw leader, right? So what's you probably have a ton of a ton of these new nurses probably weren't ever expecting this type of war zone, but they're going in and they're doing it, which is awesome too, right? So while there's this, right, the majority, it's probably the heroes, right?
Yep.
So how do you inspire the new generation?
Yeah,
like that, I guess.
Yeah. There's so much to be inspired for. First of all, we have such a great opportunity today. If you think about the people who are working in healthcare today, right? So me and many others, we have a chance to write the history of healthcare right now. We're writing it right now.
Yeah.
Generations after us, they're going to be talking about this 100th, right, world pandemic, how we managed it, how we dealt with it, and how we recreated ourselves in the middle of this pandemic, and how we came at the end, right? So I have a huge opportunity with everyone else right now that it's healthcare to write that history and to write that book. And I'm saying, oh my God, we can make it what we want to make it. And I know we want to make it a really great story. So we can get really excited about this. We're talking and seriously considering what does healthcare really look like post-pandemic? We're not going to look like what we looked like pre-pandemic, and it's a good thing.
Yeah.
You've likely seen and heard, right, that we're leveraging technology and virtual care in a way that we weren't before, right?
Right. Yep.
How cool is that? And to the benefit of the patients, same and or equal, or greater outcome in some circumstances when used appropriately. Definitely a much better experience when used appropriately. So all of that makes a heck of a lot of sense. And so even within the acute care setting, we have an opportunity right now to redesign the models of care. We work collaboratively, intensely today, way much more so than we did. We were kind of sort of forced to do that through COVID, and that's a good thing. That's one of those positive, unintentional consequences of these, major world event that allows you to check in and then to redirect and write the book. And I think that that's really exciting. I think that anyone that would want to consider joining, joining nursing as a profession is exciting in it by itself, because there's so much that you can do. The list is yay long of stuff that you can do once you become a nurse. Well, imagine that on top of that, you also have the ability to write the history of healthcare and how it's being. I think it's pretty cool.
Yeah, no, me too. So as we wrap up today, you mentioned you've been a nurse for 32 years. And you joked about retirement and you'd be acting, down the road. So when you're retired and acting and let's say you got some young kids who are with you acting, right? And they're saying, you were a nurse? And they want to hear a story about your career or what was nursing like. If you only had your first 32 years, what's a story or what is it that you would share with them briefly?
Dang, like one story in 32 years.
Is it COVID? Is that?
It's hard not to tell a COVID story, right? Because we're in the middle of it. I could tell, there's a lot of stories when I was a nurse caring for patients that I could, probably could write a book about that. But let me tell you a story that I witnessed, not as a practicing nurse, but I witnessed through this pandemic that will show. The reason why I picked this story is that it will show the power that a nurse can have in making such a significant difference in the life of someone. And I think that that's why it's important to tell that story. So we had a nurse that was caring for so I'm going to take you back to January of 2020 in Southern California, where, for the audience, as a reminder, this was the peak so far as we know it today, the highest number of patients.
21 or 2020?
2021, sorry.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
January of 2021.
Cool.
And so she takes care of this patient, elderly patient, multiple medical issues going on, and also has a dementia. So very hard for him to make a rational decision for his safety. Someone that we would have to redirect all the time, come back into the room and say, please don't get up by yourself. Please make sure you call us. Please, right? You just keep on redirecting all the time. So imagine this nurse that's has this type of patient that also is and in the middle of COVID have to and this patient also is COVID, so you have to have some different level of protection, if you will, as you go in and out. So that exercise of
changing,
donning and doffing and preparing yourself to go in and preparing yourself to go out and making sure that it's safe for the other patients. That in it by itself requires a lot of energy.
Yeah.
So when you have to do that a lot with someone, that's taxing. So when you think about all the other stuff that she had to do, and it was just one of those days where it was overwhelming, and overwhelming to a point where, it was one of those moments where she just felt that I just can't, right, anymore. Like I'm breaking. I could see myself breaking down. Words that she actually used. Now, interestingly enough, we had just introduced a process that many of our hospitals, ministries have endorsed at different levels for depending on whether it worked for them or not. But this particular nurse manager on that unit made sure that when it was time for the nurses to leave, she would gather all the nurses together, and she would have a time where she would calling letting go before you go. A time where you'd have a chance to say, what worked well for you today and what didn't, and let's talk about it now. Let's let it go, and then you can go home and then take care of your family, do what you need to do, and leave it here for others to care for, right? So that was the whole intent. Well, that nurse had a really rough time. In fact, she cried multiple times during her shift because it was really, really hard. And then she comes in and she's being asked one question that we always ask is, what made you smile today as you're getting ready to leave? Because sometimes when we're so busy and we're dealing with difficult situation, it's very easy to stay in the what's hard.
Yeah.
And and we lose sight of what made us smile. And if you don't remind yourself enough about that, then you're not creating the positive energy around yourself that you really need to create. That's the whole premise behind that. So she asked the question, what made you smile today? And interestingly, no one was expecting this particular nurse to raise her hand and say, I have something to share, because they had seen her cry, most of the day and trying to support her and how difficult of a day she had. And she tells the story, and it's about this same patient. And everyone is wondering, where is she going with this? Well, in the midst of all of this, eventually she brings the iPad into the room, and she dials the niece of that patient and makes the niece have a moment with the patient where all of a sudden the patient recognized the niece.
Nice.
And had a moment, right? A moment of, oh, I'm here on earth in this moment. I know who you are. And I smile, and she sees the patient smile. And she saw that the ability she was so connected with her patient that she knew how to connect him back to life in the moment right now. And that just made her day. That made her smile. So I share this story with you because you never know. Some small stuff sometimes seems so small, but the difference that you can make in the life of others. She made this otherwise patient that couldn't figure out which day of the week it was and not really knowing what was going on, reconnected with life, and she connected with the patient. And that just reminded her of that's why she's doing what she's doing. And it made her smile, and it made her come back the next day.
Yeah.
To be able to make a difference once again for her patients.
Yeah, that's a great purpose. And it is a good reminder still for us to step back and remember why we do what we do. Because I think you've probably been worn out. Your team has been worn out. So it's a great, simple story that makes a lot of sense. So we're wrapping it up, man. It's been great to have you on the show. We've had one of your colleagues on previously from Providence, actually a couple of times, Eric Wexler, who actually introduced me to you, as you know. So really appreciate you joining from Washington. You're in Washington today too, right?
Yep.
We had to actually reschedule our previous show, folks, because Syl does a lot of traveling, and he's he's saving lives, or his team is saving lives. So scheduling, it's really a joy that you took a few minutes with us today, Sil. I want to thank you very much. If folks want to learn more about Providence St. Joseph Health, or maybe even apply, where can they find more out about the information?
Providence.org /nurses. Perfect place to go check it out. And if you're Providence.org, perfect place to start.
All right. And if you're a nurse, they should go to and looking for opportunities.
Absolutely. Would love to talk to anyone about that. The beauty about practicing as a nurse at Providence St. Joseph Health is we pride ourselves in created sacred encounters with our patients. So I would invite every nurse to come and join and hear more about that.
Awesome. And I know Sil is also active on LinkedIn. So folks, if you want to follow him, feel free to do so. Look him up. Sil, can you pronounce your first and last name? I don't want to say.
So it's Sylvain Trepanier. So it's Sylvain.
Very good. I've said it before, but I think I had it, but not nearly as good as that. So thanks for pronouncing it. Again, thanks for joining us today, Sil.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate you.
Thanks everyone for tuning in to another episode of Pop Health Podcast. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode, and if you have and want to check out other episodes, visit us at pophealthpodcast.com, iTunes or Apple Music, Spotify, Stitcher, and now YouTube as well. Take care.